Hi, everyone. My name is Gyuri Sümegi. I'm representing Habitat for Humanity International, and this is a webinar on scaling up renovations of multi-apartment buildings in the current context of the energy crisis in Central and Eastern Europe. This is a virtual session of the UNEC Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, which is taking place in Geneva during this week. And our event tried to contribute to the discussion, to the Geneva discussion, especially related to SDG 7, which is about sustainable energy. Welcome you all and welcome our great speakers. I will introduce our great panel in a minute, but before that, I would like to give some background and context for this presentation. As I said, this is a session organized by Habitat for Humanity International together with our partners, and Habitat is a global housing NGO present in all continents. In Central and Eastern Europe, we are focusing on several strategic priorities. One of them is the scaling up of renovations of multi-apartment buildings in Central and Eastern Europe, and also how this should lead to alleviate energy poverty. A second topic for which we just finished another session starting at 10 o'clock related to the same conference. It was about alternative ways for affordable and social housing, and there we are focusing on repurposing empty buildings and introducing management models like the social rental agency model. Our third priority will be soon to address the housing situation of the Roma in Central and Eastern Europe. And our fourth priority currently is to provide housing for the Ukrainian refugees in host countries and also help Ukrainians in Ukraine with their housing situation in the current context. Today, we are focusing on the energy efficiency of buildings. Just to give you a context, probably if you are attending this session, you know that this is a crucial issue in the European Union and also in the wider Europe region, in the neighborhood of the EU, also to the east and to the south. I will refer here to statistics coming from the European Union, which are more easily available, but I think most of the figures are very similar in the bigger UNEC region. As we all know, buildings account for 40% of final energy consumption in the European Union. We have these multi-apartment buildings having a big share of this building stock in many countries in this region. 36% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, 36% is related to buildings. On the other hand, 75% of the buildings in the European Union are still energy inefficient. And natural gas plays a very important role in the heating of buildings in the European Union. Currently, it's around 40% for use space heating in the residential sector in the European Union. And you can easily say that's why this is a very complex challenge where a lot of factors are connected. So the energy efficiency of residential buildings and the energy efficiency of multi-apartment residential buildings is a policy focus where climate policy energy policy and social policy are really intertwined and interconnected. And with Russia's war against Ukraine, it also, because of this big dependence on gas and Russian gas in the past, it's also a security policy issue in the European context. And that's why for many years, for more than a decade, our colleagues first in Macedonia started to work on this issue of energy efficiency of buildings and how it relates to energy poverty. And since then, our program spread to several other countries, both in the EU and outside the EU. And it's very much in alignment, the current EU policy, which is called energy efficiency first, because investing into energy efficiency of buildings is the easiest way to reduce energy consumption and reduce the carbon footprint. So we strongly believe that in the context of SDG 7, which is about clean access for everyone for clean and affordable energy, the energy efficiency first principle buildings in the Central and Eastern European context is one of the most relevant challenges we have to address. As I said, we were active in this field for more than a decade, and among many national initiatives, we have we had two big regional projects. One was called RELY, funded by USAID, and the other is COMACT, funded by the EU Horizon 2020 funds. And just last week, we got the notification that we won another EU grant from the LIFE funding line to continue our work in this area, which also a recognition of how relevant this topic is. We are super happy that we can organize this session in partnership with UNEC. We are long-term partners of UNEC, especially the housing and the sustainable energy units. And we are very thankful for the opportunity to organize this session now. Now I'd like to turn to our first presenter, who is Eva Gerőházy, representing the Metropolitan Research Institute Budapest, a long-term research and project partner of Habitat for Humanity International. Eva is a senior researcher of MRI, working on several housing issues, including the multi-apartment building issue and the energy poverty issue. And Eva will talk about planning tools and how using planning tools could mobilize the community of homeowner associations in the context of the COMACT project. We have 3 very good speakers today, so we really have time for go deep in cases, and we have 3 cases. Eva is representing a case from Hungary, from the European Union, and we have 2 other case studies, one from North Macedonia and the other one from Armenia. So we have both EU and non-EU members, so I think we are covering the UNEC region in a very nice way. So Eva, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yuri. So I will share my presentation, and just as an introduction, I will also tell something about the research context, so something about COMACT project and energy poverty and how it captures energy poverty, and then some slides about the Hungarian context and what we are doing currently in the framework of the COMACT project. So by trying to share my screen. If you can see it. Okay, it's moving. Do you see the charts, so the graphics?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Because something about the research context and something about COMACT. So COMACT, as Yuri emphasized, it's an H2020 project financed by the European Union, and it aims to prove somehow throughout 5 pilot locations that deep renovation of multifamily buildings among those buildings where there is a high share of energy poor household. So this challenge is possible. We try to demonstrate it throughout the cases in Bulgaria, Hungary, Lithuania, North Macedonia, and Ukraine. And in this work, because the whole project started in 2020 in September, so nearly 3 years now, first we specified the energy poverty definitions, and in the autumn of 2021, we made a survey in each 5 locations consisting of 200 households in certain urban locations in the 5 pilot countries. And throughout this survey, we try to find out that practically what are the biggest risks of being energy poor and how these risks can be mitigated. And as you can see in this graph, this is one of the results of our research, that there are the 5 locations, and I have to emphasize that it's an urban context. So in case of Bulgaria, it's Burgas, in case of Hungary, it's Budapest, in case of Lithuania, 2 smaller cities, Tauraghe and Kashiedoris. In case of Macedonia, it's 1 district of Skopje and another city, which is Kavadarci. And in Ukraine, it's Odessa. So practically, our colleagues went to those urban neighborhoods where the risk of energy poverty is higher than the average. So either the social characteristics of the area or the physical characteristics of the area was somewhat more problematic than the average. And they went to owners of multifamily buildings. And based on this, you can see that if we look at different indicators of energy poverty, because we can measure it with different ways, the different indicators provide different results regarding how serious energy poverty issues are in these specific areas. You can see that it's no question, even if the survey was done before the Russian war, even in this case, the Ukrainian situation is severe. So practically, according to different indicators, either all of the residents, all of the owners of multifamily buildings, or even more than half of them can be considered energy poor. However, what is also very interesting to see that you can see if you look at the indicator of inability to keep home comfortably cool in summer, so we cannot really cool down our apartments in summer times. In Hungary and Lithuania, so the less hot countries became relatively highly energy poor, while countries like Bulgaria and Macedonia, they are kind of moderate because of the heating system they have, because using air conditioning is a typical thing in these countries, while using air conditioning in Hungary and Lithuania is much less frequent. So in this regard, these countries, even the northern countries, became much more energy poor than the southern countries. On the other hand, you can see that if we think of an indicator like an energy cost is above the 50% of the household income, then Lithuania, besides Ukraine, Lithuania and Macedonia became more problematic, because in case of the Lithuanian sample, there were kind of well-off people and very poor people, so a very mixed composition of owners in the same buildings that we have seen. So you can see that nearly 15% of the owner became 25% of the owners became energy poor under these conditions. So what is very important here, that the different indicators provide different numbers, and by far Ukraine was, even before the war, the most who was suffering from energy poverty. What is also very important, and you can see from this slide, that when we were speaking about what are the factors that contribute to energy poverty the most, we found it's not a miracle, low income is the one who has the biggest correlation to energy poverty. Physical states of the building, heating system seem to be much less relevant than this. Low income became the major factor. And of course, as you can see from this figure, being alone and living alone, which result in a relatively big living space and living area per person, it's also a very high risk factor of being energy poor. And if we look at the two factors that are combined, so who are the ones who have low income and most probably are living alone, you can see this kind of blue dot in the middle, which is high energy poverty of elderly women. So what we found that the biggest risk of being energy poor among the urban multifamily owner population, no question, it's single women pensioners being in their age of above 65. Practically, these are the ones who are the most risk of being energy poor. So specific local programs or even national programs that consider this kind of special target group into account would be the most efficient way to enter into this problem. So these are some words about the overall research context. And then let's think about how the survey results and how the actions in COMECT were implemented in Hungary. What we found in the same survey, because we made this 200 household survey in the 3rd district of Budapest, and this 3rd district contains of very different living areas. One of them, as you can see, is the biggest housing estate practically in Budapest, more than 40,000 units. And we had also areas in a more inner part of District 3, which contained buildings from the 50s and the 60s. And we've also found, and I think it is very important to emphasize from a research point of view, that energy poverty has different phases. And while it seems that technical issues are the main reasons for energy poverty in the buildings of the neighborhoods of the 50s and 60s, so you can see they are individually heated and very poorly insulated buildings, but the people living there has a relatively normal income. While in the panel housing estates, the condition of the buildings are much bigger. District heating provides much better comfort, and even the panel housing estates are not as badly insulated in Hungary. So not the technical conditions, but the social composition of owners, which creates the problem. People living in this specific housing estate has much problematic financial background than the ones living in the 50s and 60s. So their energy poverty is mainly rooted from their low income. This is what the survey found in District 3. So what we can do currently here in Hungary and in Budapest with regard to deep renovation of multifamily buildings. I listed here some kind of major issues that we have to see. We have to solve. You can see that multifamily buildings in our Hungarian context are much less affected by the energy price increase. And here the question of energy crisis come into the picture. In Hungary, energy prices are highly protected, so there is a strong cap on it, up to the so-called average consumption that households consume. So up to this kind of number, you have a very much protected price. And it turned out, based on our experience, but based on our big surveys, that multifamily buildings, so a flat in a multifamily buildings, very rarely consumes above the average. The ones that have the biggest risks are in the countryside and family house buildings. They consume much more per square meter and per resident and per flat than multifamily buildings. So practically our multifamily buildings didn't really have high energy price increase. However, construction prices, I mean, in the last years, doubled practically, which means that any kind of investment in deep renovation, it was problematic even before, but even in the last 1-2 years, it comes out that financially it never pays off. So there are 40-50 years payoff periods, which you simply do not invest. And in Hungary, practically there is no public subsidy for the renovation of multifamily buildings. There is a somewhat subsidized loan, which exists for decades, but it is very sufficient for small-scale interventions, but for big interventions, practically there is no subsidy. So under these conditions, when there is a high payoff period, but no subsidy, it is not realistic to implement deep renovation. So what we can do now in the COMEC project, what we are currently doing is that we started the preparation process. If we cannot implement, we at least prepare, because we have a hope. I do not know how much you are aware of that Hungary is in negotiation with the European Union, and we didn't get the European funds yet, so the contracts are not signed. But we have a hope that sometimes it might happen. And if it happens, we have to be prepared. So what we are doing in 2 of our pilot buildings, that we started making a technical inspection, making an energy audit, and we are about to create renovation roadmaps. And these renovation roadmaps are the tools for us. So these are the tools through which we can communicate with the 2 pilot buildings communities. We have several meetings with them. I will tell you some words about this in the last slide. So this is a tool to strengthen the building community. This also creates, empowers the property managers, because it provides them additional technical and financial information. Because of course the renovation roadmap is not only a technical roadmap, it's also a financial roadmap. And it also links us to financial institutions. So we are thinking about having grants, having bank loans, and also using very different schemes if we don't have access to any kind of grant, which is probably an energy efficiency obligation scheme. We will see. And as there is also an existing resource center, so a one-stop shop operating in that district, we hope that throughout creating this roadmap and involving them into the creation of the roadmap, we can also empower them and provide them new knowledge about how this kind of activity can be multiplied and taken into their business model. So what we are doing now, and this is my last slide, is that we are working with 2 communities. One of them, as you can see, it's a historical type of building. I mean, it's not historically protected, but it's 120 years old. And we already had a meeting with the owners before the inspection, so it was on the 6th of March. We had a specific meeting with the accounting committee, which are some owners who are practically supervising the real estate managers. And the technical inspection is going on in these weeks. And when it is complete, in April, we hope to have another meeting with them and showing them the results of the technical inspection. And then if a tender comes, then the technical and financial plans will be available. So we have to convert these plans into a tender for the call in order to gain some grant. So we might be first in the row with this preparation. So it is already started in this kind of traditionally built building. And in case of the panel building, we will have our first, so before the inspection meeting, even this afternoon, late afternoon. So we will start the community building and negotiation process with them just for today. And throughout these kind of working together, not only the community, which is forming and which is starting speaking about energy efficiency, but we have a lot of in-field information which we can forward then towards decision makers on local level and hopefully at the end decision makers on European level as well. So practically this was my presentation as a kind of appetizer for the further discussions in this workshop.
Thank you, Eva. We planned this session in a way that we have a question and answer session at the end of the session. But now there is an opportunity to ask some very quick clarifying questions. So I encourage the participants, if you have any burning questions right now to ask from Eva, please put it in the chat. And while you are doing that, I have one question for you, Eva, for the time being, is that you described how difficult is the context in Hungary for many respects to make the case for a renovation of a multi-apartment building. I'm curious what kind of arguments you use at those meetings to convince the homeowners, and what is your first experience? What did you learn from the meeting? What is their interest? What is their motivation at all, if at all, to go for a renovation of their buildings? Thank you.
Honestly, our selling point in these first meetings, it's not necessary that we will implement a deep renovation. But we tell them that that this is a process, and what we provide them is the technical inspection, the financial planning, and then we will see what comes at the end. So what we tell them, it's not an obligation, it's an opportunity. So this is a process. Let's see together what we can solve and what we cannot solve. So what we have seen in the first meeting, what we had, is that this is a complaining meeting. So this was about what problems they experience, what is their view about energy efficiency as such. And as you can see, the first meeting we had with a traditionally built building. And what is very interesting for us, that in traditionally built buildings, energy efficiency, it's a smaller issue because these are relatively small units. And as I mentioned to you, the energy prices are capped. So their energy costs are not overwhelmingly problematic. What they really feel is that they have structural problems. So they are getting wet, getting mold, they have problems with the roofs, they have problems with the basement, the courtyard, and things like that, the pipes. And what we have to learn is how energy efficiency can be linked to structural problems, and what are the interventions through which we fix the building somehow and we save also some energy. And what we also would like to learn from here, that what you can do if there are individual heating systems and you would like to make something on the building as a unit itself. So how you can save energy in a common action where most of energy is throughout individual systems. So what we have learned is really that people are thinking about these energy systems. I mean, changing the heating systems or changing the boilers, the hot water boilers somehow. But these will be rather smaller steps towards energy efficiency. So just to sum up, we do not push them, but we try to make a kind of ordinary route of learning together with them. And then we will see some months from now how energy efficiency is pictured in their head.
I also gather from what you described that basically you have to create a dialogue, you have to create a mutual exchange, a trust, and first you have to listen what the community's first priorities, and then later on you can convince them maybe about the directly energy efficiency related investments.
We thought that we should have the numbers and the data first. First, we should be open, then should have the numbers and the data, and then we can negotiate over the numbers and the data.
Yeah.
This seemed to be a more organic route for working with them.
Thank you. That's very insightful. Thank you very much, Eva. Now from Hungary, we move to North Macedonia. Let me greet here our next panelist, Liliana Alcheva, who is the Deputy Director of Programs at Habitat for Humanity Macedonia for many years. And Liliana started to implement renovation programs for multi-apartment buildings for more than a decade. So probably you are the most experienced of all of us in working with multi-apartment buildings and working with communities, and also you reach the bigger scale, at least in the Habitat network, because you also established a building maintenance company and also provide loans for renovation. But today, Liliana proposed to talk about a relatively recent development and project, how they establish resource centers, or which are in the EU language very similar to one-stop shops, to mobilize the community and help the community of homeowners to go for renovation, and how does that relate to the bigger national and EU policy context. So Liliana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gyuri, and it's a pleasure that I can share our experience, and also it's a great opportunity to share my thoughts about all processes that are going in Europe, in Central and Eastern Europe, and are related with the energy efficiency, renewable energy, climate change mitigation, and those things that are very important to overcome the general poverty that exists among the people in Central and Eastern Europe. I will share my presentation. Okay, I know I have some problems before, but
That's
I
fine.
hope this is not an issue anymore.
And in the meantime, let me ask our dear audience that if you have any questions or comments, please insert them in the chat, and then we will address your questions later on. Thank you. And Liliana.
I think that you can see the presentation. In my presentation, I will focus on the global goals and targets that are related with the energy efficiency and renewable energy and clean energy for all people, which are sustainable development goals and EU targets and directives. Also, I will a little bit talk about our activities which are related with the renovation of multi-apartment buildings, and my main focus on this presentation is about the citizen engagement, and I will try to point it out at the end of the presentation, emphasizing the challenges that we as a Habitat Macedonia are facing in all this process, because as you can see from the presentation, in Macedonia we have a very good cooperation with all relevant stakeholders, and I will try to summarize all of their problems into this presentation. So first of all, why energy efficiency in the multifamily apartment buildings is a special issue, is something that we need to put a special focus on that. In all countries, there is a high level of privatization of the apartment buildings. In Macedonia, 96% of the apartments in the multi-apartment buildings are privately owned. So this complicates the activities when we need the joint action in the buildings. Then there is a socialist history of the countries that creates a special relations among the homeowners, the institutions, the community service providers, and also the main context is that the housing is considered as a social instead of economic category. That also goes to underdeveloped real estate and facility management market. There are no market-oriented financial models for multi-apartment buildings. There are a lot of opportunities for financing energy efficiency and energy retrofits of the individual houses, but there are no many for the multi-family apartment buildings. Eva mentioned in her presentation that we have highly mixed social structure of the homeowners. We have the richest, the very rich people and very poor people living in the same building with completely different interests and completely different opportunities. Also, there is a deficiency of skilled workers, and there are no many social supporting systems that can support the energy poor household to upgrade their position and live better.
Liliana, we can still see your opening slide only.
I'm sorry, I don't know why. Let me.
Okay, now we are on the slide 3.
On the slide 3, and now
slide
it's slide
4.
4. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I will go now in the on the Sustainable Development Goals. It's agenda of the United Nations. We have 17 goals, which are very broad and very general, and each of the countries needs to define their own priorities and work to achieve the sustainable development goals. With these sustainable development goals, the biggest problem is their localization, or for the country like Macedonia, or even for the other European Union countries. I think one of the biggest problems is how to follow the global goals and follow at the same time the EU initiatives. In the recent times, there are some connections between the Agenda 2030 and the European Union initiative. Macedonia is not a EU country, but it is a member of Energy Community, and most of the directives and goals that are prescribed by the European Union related with the energy, we are obliged to implement. If we are talking about the Western Balkan particularly, all these linkages are even going lower, and there is no much resources to implement the energy efficiency activities in the Western Balkan countries. All these policies and initiatives are translated into Macedonian legislation, and we have several strategy, energy law on energy efficiency, bylaws that are supporting the implementation of these policies, but all these documents are still not enough to have more impact on the field. Even in the Western Europe, only 1% of the buildings are renovated. Even there are a lot of programs for support of the buildings. Situation in Macedonia is not very different with the housing stock in multi-apartment buildings, doesn't differ much from the other countries in Central and Eastern Europe, and we have a lot of old buildings that really need immediate maintenance and retrofits, but also at the same time the quality of the existing objects requires much more expensive interventions, because only 6% of the all residential buildings belong to energy class C or D. So to upgrade the existing buildings with such a quality of the construction, we need much more expensive intervention to reach the energy classes. Habitat Macedonia is the organization that works on this issue, particularly with multi-apartment buildings, since 2009, and until now we have renovated more than 7 apartment buildings. That the renovation works, and that there are significant impact on the quality of life of the household, and the impact on the energy savings and CO2 emission proved the Energy Globe Award that Habitat Macedonia received. Actually, with the renovation of 60 buildings, we produced a safe energy that is producing 1 small hydropower plant. And that's a proof that we need to invest in the renovation of buildings in general. And now I will much focus on the citizen engagement, and because it is put as one of the main pillars to achieve the green agenda objectives. And citizen engagement is also very important, especially when we are talking about the renovation of the multifamily apartment buildings, having in mind all elements, all specificities of multifamily apartment building housing stock in Central and Eastern Europe that I've mentioned before. So Habitat Macedonia is particularly focusing on supporting homeowners. And for the homeowners, we are preparing a training, also prepared a publication and involve them into the process, through strengthening their capacities to be more capable to understand and then implement the activities. All of these activities are financed by the international donors. We've started with these activities with the USAID financed project, improving energy efficiency for the low-income household, and continue also with the USAID project Rely, which is a regional project. Also for the homeowners, the most important things are informative sessions, something that Eva mentioned in her presentation. These informative sessions are very important because we are talking about the on those sessions we are talking about the concrete buildings to be renovated and concrete conditions, how the process of the renovation will continue. Most of our buildings, I mean, I'm saying our, but most of the buildings that Habitat Macedonia renovated were renovated with the subsidies of the local self-government. And on this informative session, the participation of local self-government is very much needed. Then also supporting the educational sector, organizing workshops with the high school students and introducing a curricula in the high school, in the secondary high school, technical high school, involving teachers and involving entrepreneurs through the process of training and process of bringing together the entrepreneurs and the homeowners, and also together with the local self-government representative. I think one of the important thing is organizing this so-called stakeholder advisory group in terms of citizen engagement, and organizing debates, roundtables, discuss the issues on the higher level involving the representatives of the national and local governments. Having all these activities as a pre-activities, we actually Habitat Macedonia was acted as a resource center, and then we decided to open first an online resource center. It's a web page where people can approach and see a different type of information related with the energy efficiency in multifamily apartment buildings. And also as an activities that started before we formally opened this online resource center was the preparation of the register of apartment buildings and apartments. I will not go into deep about this register, but let me share that at the moment this register, which is a database of 5,000 buildings, is transformed into a web tool with much more information on the building level related with the energy efficiency that really helps in the process of the renovation of the buildings. And all these activities that were implemented through the USAID finance project, we continue with the COMACT project. Eva mentioned something that was going on in Hungary. We are also part of that project and continue with the education and support for the homeowners through this project. And here with COMACT project, we've established 2 physical resource centers in 2 target municipality in Karpoš and Kavadarci, and they are now operating in the frame of the municipalities. All these things, and this is my last slide, can be are accompanied by a lot of challenges. First of all, there are so many plans at the global, at the European, and the local, at the national level, and there is really no big results in terms of renovation of the buildings. It's very difficult to follow all these goals and objectives, and it's a big problem how to localize the global objectives with the priorities of the people living in one small municipality in Macedonia, for example. Also, the problems these days that we are facing in the past year, even more, the instability, insecurity, war, and other inflation and other things that are happening in Europe is really demotivating factor for energy efficiency of the residential sector. There is no financial models that are supporting renovation of multi-apartment buildings. In Macedonia, for example, the only fund that is available for the renovation of multi-apartment building is Habitat Revolving Fund, which is a pity. And the local government and national governments are more focusing on the renovation of the public buildings. Increasing prices of construction material, no need to comment on that, but also increasing the prices of the basic living products is really a big demotivating factor for investment in energy efficiency. Also, there are a lot of difficulties to achieve the quality standards with the existing standards, with the existing condition of the buildings. And the last but not the least is the insufficient capacities in terms of knowledge, skills, resources, especially in the municipalities, in the institutions, but also in the NGO sector. Business sector is a little bit stronger in the knowledge and skills, but still all these capacities are not integrated as a one force to scale up the renovation of multifamily apartment buildings. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much. I will stop here. I hope it was not too long.
No, it was excellent. Thank you, Liliana. I just want to note that how interesting it is, so to speak, that Eva is talking about a country of 10 million with great challenges to renovate buildings. And then we have North Macedonia, a country of 2 million, where one NGO is able to renovate buildings to a relatively large scale. So it was super interesting to see these two stories against each other. There are two questions we received. One question from Annika Grafweg. I would want to keep it for our end discussion because it could be an interesting question to all the three of you. What is the selection process to select the buildings to be included in the renovation program? I want all the three of you to think about this. And after the last presentation, we will get back to this question. But there's one specific question to you, Liliana, in the chat box from Bets Derkian. If you can give a very short detail about you mentioned 6 different financial models Habitat Macedonia developed. You don't have to give all the 6, but just to explain what is the variety.
I mean, there are different models. One is with the subsidy with the municipality. Municipalities are offering subsidies of 20, 30, 100% for the renovation of the common spaces of the building, which is the biggest problem to invest into, to convince the homeowners to invest. Another model is that the finances from the revolving fund are going directly to the homeowner associations or through the facility management company who is managing that building. The third model is that the finances are going to each of the households in the building, but first of all, they have to make a common understand a consent that they would like to renovate the building. Otherwise is not I mean, it will not work if 100% of the homeowners are not agreed that they would like to renovate the building. The fourth model is that the money are going through the construction company who will later on do the renovation. I'm talking about that type of models. The fifth might go through the municipality to establish their own revolving fund and support the homeowners, include the subsidies into that fund. We tried all 6 models, and the most popular model is that the homeowners would like to, after they agreed that they would like to renovate the building, they would like to take the loan by itself and guarantee with their own property.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think the main message is that we are talking about mixed models of subsidy and loan. And the big variable is how big should be the subsidy. We have some examples in Europe where some governments gave 100% subsidy, and that we all thought that it's a bad practice because it's not sustainable. Liliana, may I ask you, what do you think is a relatively good ratio of subsidy and loan, which is sustainable but still attractive to homeowners in your experience?
25 to 30% subsidies from the municipalities is sufficient to cover the cost for the renovation of the common spaces, and it's reasonable and also motivating for the homeowners. But also we need to go to lower the subsidies that are coming from the municipality and increase the involvement of the business sector and find more market-oriented models that will support the renovation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Liliana. And now from North Macedonia, we go to the very east, to Armenia. Very different context from Hungary and from Macedonia, but still sharing some commonalities because of our common history and heritage coming from the so-called socialist times. Let me introduce our next speaker, Varsenik Kloyan, who is the project manager at Habitat for Humanity Armenia, and Varsenik has been implementing renovation projects and also doing a lot of policy advocacy in Armenia in the last decade. And Varsenik will talk about this issue in the Armenian context much more from a policy perspective and what we can propose to policymakers. Thank you, Varsenik, for joining, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gyuri. From previous 2 presentations, I understood, yes, Armenia is has different context, but we have so many similarities, what concerns residential buildings renovation. So many similarities and difficulties. And on one hand, this is good because somehow we can exchange our experience to help each other. Now I will share my screen.
I just want to encourage our audience again that please use the chat. Thank you already for the great questions we already received. And after the last presentation, we are going to have a longer time for also to react to questions. So please use the chat box for your questions. Thank you.
I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Renovation of multi-apartment buildings and their energy upgrade is also an important question for Armenia. And today I'm going to focus on 2 aspects of the market barriers that hinder this development of this sector in Armenia. This is policy reforms and financial schemes. Throughout our work experience, Habitat Armenia has identified 4 main factors that are highly affecting this sector development. Those are policy gaps, financial mechanisms, awareness level of homeowners on residential energy efficiency measures and their benefits, as well as low capacities of homeowner associations to implement renovation and energy efficiency measures in the buildings. We have started being engaged in renovation of multifamily building stock since 2011 through two projects actually. One was condo project, which was fully financed by Habitat Armenia and started in 2011. And the second project, which was with financial assistance of USAID, which was a Rely project, focused on residential energy efficiency for low-income households. And throughout implementation of these two projects, we have identified a number of market barriers. And here I have pointed out those barriers which are mainly the result of legislative gaps in the market. I think I have, the first and one of the main problems is the poor management of apartment buildings, and this is the result of no qualification requirements which are set by the current law. And homeowner associations, which are the main bodies right now, which are managing the maintenance of the buildings, they have really low capacities, both technical and financial literacy. There is a low collection rate of maintenance fees, and this is the result of ineffective enforcement mechanisms which are existing by law. The current one is that the homeowner associations can go to the court if the homeowner is not paying. However, it proved to be not effective because it requires a lot of paperwork and a lot of time, and at the end it proves to be not efficient at all. And as well as there is no transparency in the funds management. Actually, it was like this when we entered the market before the reform I will talk about later. There have been no financial products available in the market, and mainly because banks are not willing to lend to homeowner associations because they do not have collateral which can be used as a secure method for non-payment of the loan. As well as there are certain legal gaps in the market which are also creating legal risks for financial institutions. There is no available technical and energy data for the buildings in Armenia, and there is a need to be this need to be specified by law, that there need to be a common registry, a unified registry of technical and energy data for apartment buildings available for key decision makers, especially for the managers of housing stock and the policymakers in this sector. And this is a big issue in Armenia right now. And we were even trying to understand how Macedonia started to create this registry system. And I understood, at the end, we understood with the current policymakers in Armenia that we have a bit stricter requirement to the collection of technical and energy data. They required licensed experts or companies to do this work, which has really high costs. And otherwise we cannot do just with other technical expertise, which is comparably require low investment. So this is still a big issue which the policymakers are thinking how to make it possible to collect all this technical and energy data of the housing stock. Another barrier is the low homeowners' wrong perceptions about who shall take care of the maintenance of the common share of the property, and this is mainly coming from Soviet Union times when the state used to take care of the common shares, but after the privatization, of course, the situation has changed. However, homeowners still think that the state shall take care of these costs. Besides this, the regulation, the current law does not provide registration of common shared, not for the building, neither for each homeowner. And let's go to the next slide. So having all this in mind, since 2015, Habitat Armenia started engaging in advocacy activities targeted at the reform of residential buildings management law. We won Visegrad Fund grant, through which we have analyzed the best case studies from several Visegrad countries and did comparison of the legal system in Armenia and created a set of recommendations which was submitted to Urban Development Committee, which is the main body responsible for the policy reform. The actual process of policy reform started in 2018. And in 2019, the Prime Minister created a so-called working group, which the main task of which was also the reform of the current laws governing the homeowners associations, operations, as well as the management of multi-apartment buildings. Habitat Armenia has been invited to all working group meetings and submitted our policy positions regarding different provisions set for the reform by the committee. In addition to this, Habitat Armenia has organized a number of roundtables, conferences, forums in this sector in order to create dialogue between policymakers and exchange the knowledge or knowledge from best practice examples. So the key achievements in the policy reform, just a moment. Okay, started since 2020 when there was set one bank account for each building, and this before that homeowner association could manage more than 100 buildings, but all of them had just one bank account on which all the money was accumulated, and therefore the transparency of the usage of funds was not really good. And however, it gave so-called flexibility in terms of covering different sudden expenditures cost for different buildings. Now this new law also makes it mandatory to transfer the funds online or through electronic system, not paid by cash. And the new system also requires possibility to create a reserve fund for each building, which can be later used also for unplanned expenses or for some modernization works of the buildings, or to put as a collateral in the bank against the secured loans. For these two positions, Habitat Armenia actually has been advocated since 2015. In 2011, we had another good reform, which was the easy number of votes for decision-making by homeowners for the modernization works in the apartment buildings. Before, it was 2/3 of the votes required to do any type of renovation work, including energy efficiency measures. And now, with this new law, it requires only 50 plus 1%. So this is much easing the decision making for implementing such works in the buildings. In 2022, procedures have been approved by the government for apartment buildings maintenance, operation, and modernization. And these procedures will then be also part of the education program for the increasing qualification level of the managers of housing stock. So I just want also to mention here that in the pipeline, there are also two very important questions. One is creation of professional management system of apartment buildings in Armenia, and the second one is passportization of technical and energy data of buildings for the newly constructed buildings. So I would like also to talk about the financial models which we have created and tested in the market. Actually, there were several models, but two have been tested, and we can say they proved to be also successful. One was the financial mechanism, which incorporated loan and subsidy mechanism. And Habitat Armenia started partnership with municipalities, which secured up to 40% subsidy for the renovation works in the buildings, and the rest was taken as a loan from the partner financial bank, and it was being paid off through monthly maintenance fee collections. This enabled to do partial energy efficiency renovation works in the buildings, not deep renovation. So since the beginning, we did market research and we understood that like the case was in Hungary, it was similar to Armenia. We understood that homeowners are not ready to do big investments for the deep renovation of their houses. Of their buildings. Therefore, we started by step-by-step approach. So we started with only partial renovation works, which were accompanied by the capacity building for homeowner associations, awareness raising for homeowners, and the improvement of legislative framework in Armenia. The second financial model that were used was the guarantee fund model, which didn't include subsidies. So this second model proved to be, let's say, we can say more sustainable because it was fully, the renovation work were financed fully by loan and then repaid by the collection of maintenance fees from homeowners. There was no subsidy mechanism involved in this, and this guarantee fund was created by Habitat Armenia through financial support of USAID, and it secured up to 50% of the no payment of the loans, and this helped to encourage new financial institutions to enter the market and also to provide, let's say, loans with comparably preferential financial terms. Now, I would like also to summarize the key learnings of the implemented projects. The first that I would like to say is that key cooperation of the ecosystem actors. And the second one is the government support in terms of financial support and improvement of the legal regulatory system. The capacities of homeowner associations shall be increased, and there need to be a special education system to create professional managers institute for housing stock in Armenia. There need to be subsidy and loan financial mechanism in order to motivate homeowner associations to implement renovation works in the buildings. Targeted subsidies shall be available for vulnerable groups. There need to be knowledge transfer in order to help the market to adopt best case studies from other countries. And we also understood that there need to be research need to be done to find out lower cost technologies for full retrofitting of the buildings, because high investment costs for the deep renovation of the buildings is a big obstacle, not for Armenia, for all the region, because it requires very, very long payback periods, and homeowners simply are not able to cover these costs. So this is all with my presentation. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you, Varsanik. I don't see any specific questions to you in the chat, but I want to ask you that it's very impressive how you engaged in the policy advocacy work in the last almost 10 years. Can you explain a bit what was the point that the government of Armenia or the local government started to take you seriously? That why should they listen to your recommendation? What was there a turning point, or how did that happen?
One is that we provided demonstration projects, and we created financial models. Through these projects, we understood the main gaps in the market, which we could, let's say, bring the voice from the market to the policy makers table to discuss. And then we also, as we have a really big network of experts, and also thanks to Habitat International good network, we could provide this expertise and consultations to our policymakers as well. And we also have really good connections with all key stakeholders in the market. And also the Visegrad Fund project that we did in 2015, we have created prior to this the partnership with the Urban Development Committee. We have a signed agreement that we are going to help them through these Visegrad recommendations for the upcoming policy reform. So we had, let's say, the interest from the government in this work before engaging into this work.
Thank you. That's very impressive. Thank you very much. I just want to summarize in a way my impression in a way that it's really the three cases not only present the three different countries in the bigger UNEC region, but how you can react to a very concrete context, like in Hungary, in a very challenging policy context and the political atmosphere. What you can do is that let's go to the community and start preparing something for long term. In Macedonia, in a very different context, Habitat was able to mobilize lots of foreign funds, and with that you could really become one of the biggest providers of renovations in the country, and that's led to the government to really listen to you, and because you demonstrated through all these renovations of 70 buildings that you know what you are talking about. And yet again, in Armenia, in a totally very different and challenging context, with relatively small investment, still you were able to attract the government's attention and become a reliable partner for the government when it comes to all kinds of policy discussions. So I think it's super interesting to see these three stories. And at this point, I want to go back to Annika Grafsek's question that which I mentioned to you 20 minutes ago. If you can, all the three of you were part of either renovations, or in the case of Hungary, you are preparing for renovation. just in 2 minutes, what was your process to select the buildings you are working with or you plan to work with? Anybody would like to start?
Can I mean, the selection of the buildings in most of the cases are at the open call. There are rare examples where the building who organize themselves are coming to us, and also because it's about the loans, we are accepting those buildings and giving a credit that they were capable to organize themselves, because that's the most difficult part of the whole process. The other buildings are selecting in cooperation with the municipality. Whenever municipality is offering subsidies, they are opening a call where the buildings are applying, and but we don't have a big competition in all these open calls. There are no many applicants, and we are selecting. I mean, we are accepting everyone who are capable, every building who is capable, and every homeowner association who is capable to organize themselves, fulfill the documents with our support, and agree that they will repay the loan.
Thank you, Liliana. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. We have developed actually selection criteria for the buildings to be engaged, and the first one was it shall have no bigger damage level than 2. That is, we have categorized, like the first 2 levels are okay for the renovation. Third level is not ready. The third level of damage. So it should damage level for the building shall be no greater than 2, and the collection rate for the building for the maintenance piece shall be at least 70%. And there need to be the confirmation of homeowners by signature of at least 2/3 of the homeowners to engage in the project to renovate the buildings and pay regularly fees to cover the loan. I think these were the 3 main criteria to select the building.
Thank you very much, Varshini. And Eva?
I think our approach was very different because the purpose was very different. I think what is very important to see that that Habitat Armenia and Habitat Macedonia is working on the field of renovation for many years. And they are facilitators, they are resource centers, they are financial organizations somehow. So they are really active in the field. And the selection process they apply, this is how I interpret it, is practically the ones who are capable of or has the potential to make the renovation process. So it's practically rather selecting the ones, I wouldn't say that the best ones, but at least the ones that are capable to organize themselves to provide some kind of financial stability. Because from an organizational point of view, this is the filter that should be there. Our approach, because Metropolitan Research Institute is a research institute, so practically we are not working directly with the buildings, we are not implementing organizations, we are part of the COMEC project for 3 years now. We were conceptualizing renovation for decades, but practically didn't really implement renovation. So in the framework of COMEC, the buildings that were selected from the other angle. So we rather wanted to select those ones that have much more bigger problems with energy poverty, but still not the extremes. So not from marginalized neighborhoods, because probably we can recall that the purpose of the COMEC project is to show that there are the buildings that have, we call them, how to say, that need just a small push to go over the line and be able to in a sustainable way to bid for grants to organize themselves, but the ones who needed the push. I mean that the ones who have more than average energy poor households. And the way how we selected our buildings is that in Budapest, I think in 2015, there was a so-called social map created based on the census data of 2011. So we practically see in a map that what are the crucial, let's say, blocks of flats all around Budapest that has a worse than average social composition, where the income level is lower, where the employment level is lower, and things like that. And we also see it in the District 3 of Budapest. So we see that where the social problems are. And practically, when we made the surveys of 200 households, we selected those neighborhoods. We selected from 3 different neighborhoods. So the inner part of the district, which are the traditionally built buildings, the 50s, 60s buildings, and the panel housing estates. So practically, we had 3 samples, 3 sub-samples. And when we made the survey, we selected those buildings from the surveyed ones, so the more socially crucial ones, where the cooperation potential of the property manager was supportive. Because if we would like to work with the buildings, the gatekeeper is the property manager. And even if we would like to demonstrate that we can create communities from the ground, it's not true. You need a good leadership. And of course, you can create good leadership, but it takes very much time. So, and we didn't have the time for that. So practically, we choose those ones that are worse than average regarding their social composition, the ones that were not renovated, so that needs deep renovation, and the ones that has a good leadership. And based on that, we started our conversation. And of course, also we had to have a kind of, let's say, reassurance for the property manager that, okay, there is a community of owners which is more or less functional. So there are a functional accounting committee, or at least they are coming to the general assemblies time to time. So we picked a better managed buildings from the worst of composition of multifamily buildings.
Thank you, Eva. It's a very nice reflection of this, which I think was common in all 3 cases, that you only can work, in this case, you can only work with buildings or homeowner associations which have some functionality, and also because of the legislation where you can secure the majority vote for the renovation, I believe. Our time is getting to an end very soon, and I don't see any further questions coming from the audience. So I would like to ask you, the 3 of you, as a closing thing, for some closing remarks, very shortly, 1-2 minutes maximum. Is there anything new or interesting you picked up in the conversation yourself? What's your main takeaway or conclusion from this conversation? Just very briefly, in 1-2 minutes.
So if I may start, because I think it was very interesting, but also Lilian and Barsenik emphasized that from a certain, from bird's eyes, these 3 countries seem to be very similar. I mean, we are struggling with organizational issues and technical issues and the lack of money and things like that. However, we know from the ground that probably the depths of the problems might be a little bit different, because at least in Hungary, we have the legal background and some kind of financial background as well. So at least the banks issued joint loans for decades. So there is something as a foundation. But I think what we also learned from each other, that without the seed of a certain amount of grant, either from the local municipality, the national, the ministries or the EU, without this seed, which might be at least 25-30%, of course, depending on the renovation works and the composition of the owners, you cannot even dream of start such a process, because you cannot not even energize the community, but you cannot energize the financial institutions and other stakeholders either. So this is something which is crucially needed in order that you can create an ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Eva. Very much appreciated.
If I may now, I mean, I know actually what the colleagues from Hungary and Armenia are doing. We are cooperating frequently and asking each other, but still the interesting thing is that in all countries it's very difficult to realize the real renovation of the building. Yes, we had 70 buildings renovated in the past 10 and more years, but all those buildings were renovated on steroids. There is no functional mechanisms to go through that process very smoothly. And one of the issues is, yes, the highly privatized ownership of the multi-apartment buildings, but on the other side, I think that there are no motivation and incentives from the ecosystem to support the homeowners, and that this renovation really have a high benefits for the homeowners and for the companies, for the government as well. There is no doubt that benefits exist, but still there is no clear mechanisms to go through that process smoothly without putting a lot of efforts, a lot of energy, which is really, I mean, it doesn't at some point all of us who are working on this issue will say, okay, it's enough. I mean, we are tired.
Thank you, Liliana. Varsanik?
Through listening to my colleagues and from our experience, I think that the role of facilitators and promoters for the system changes is really important. And it is very, very useful to create cooperation with the government and with financial sector and with housing management sector, and also create awareness of households, homeowners on the benefits of renovations and the savings that they can have through energy retrofitting of their buildings. And the costs are really high everywhere for the deep renovation, and therefore it's very important that the state at least can support through subsidies at least certain percent or to cover the cost of such renovations. These are very, I think, the key issues to scale up this sector renovations.
Thank you very much, all the three of you. I just want to go back to what Liliana called this is on steroids. I think some of us use this terminology for some time, but it's very much related also what Varsanik was saying about that you need this facilitation for the renovations to happen. I think it's our experience that using international donor money, either US or EU or any other funding, our network, either Habitat Network or our friends and partners, basically doing this facilitation service free of charge to homeowner associations. And these are the steroids. And what we started to say for a couple of time now, and this is our main policy ask at the EU level and many times at national level, that this facilitation role, what NGOs are currently paying in many countries, should be institutionalized, and there will be government subsidy, not only for the renovations, but for this type of facilitation role, which would make this facilitation service sustainable and not on steroids, what Liliana was saying. Our time is up. Thank you very much. Thanks for our great speakers, and thanks for our audience to stay with us. And hope to see you at another event soon where we will discuss the same topic. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.